The more I see white pacifist liberals protect known racists on the streets from rightfully getting their asses whooped, from stopping protesters from trampling ICE agents and liberating their captives, the more I take Malcolm X's stance on them and come to the realization that we have a white liberal problem. Republicans and racist libertarians like to throw a specific Malcolm X quote around about the dangerous liberal. They like to leave out that Malcolm didn't much care for them either.
As a friend, he may have a white man who's friendly, but being friendly and being a friend, I think, are two different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
Chapter 1. Pacifism equals racism. The white solution to the black community being murdered by pigs in the streets is for them to not protect themselves and allow themselves to be murdered in order to appeal to the better nature of the pigs murdering them. Perhaps they'll get tired of murdering and realize that what they're doing is wrong. This is also just a cop-out for how they really feel. White liberals have always been okay with pigs policing the violent black neighborhoods because these crackers are too big of cowards to go there themselves.
The only time I hear people talk about nonviolence is when black people move to defend themselves against white people. Black people cut themselves every night in the ghetto. Don't anybody talk about nonviolence. Lyndon Baines Johnson is busy bombing the hell out of Vietnam. Don't nobody talk about nonviolence. White people beat up black people every day. Don't nobody talk about nonviolence. But as soon as black people start to move, the double standard comes into being. You can't defend yourself. That's what you're saying. Because you show me a man who would advocate aggressive violence that would be able to live in this country.
Furthermore, it's extremely racist when these whiteys face little, if any, threat from the acts of piggery. They get to watch all the violence on their TVs in the comfort of their living rooms, pretending to be disgusted by what they see, when, in fact, they are either completely desensitized from it, and or they just don't care because, again, they are fucking racists. Chapter 2. The pacifists they model themselves after and the historical reality. Part 1. Gandhi. I refuse to refer to this guy as Mahatma, meaning a person venerated for spirituality and high-mindedness. Due to his grooming of children and pedophilia, he slept naked with children. This isn't a history lesson on Gandhi's past, but on his pacifist beliefs, which white libs like to model themselves after. If you want a really good deep dive on Gandhi and how fucked up he was, check out the Respect the Dead podcast episode on him. When it came to the millions of Jewish peoples who were murdered during the Holocaust, Gandhi had some advice for them. The Jews should have offered themselves to the butcher's knife. They should have thrown themselves into the sea from the cliffs. As it is, they succumbed anyway in their millions. Gandhi. When we look at how white liberals treat black and brown response to state violence, this is essentially what they want. The decolonization of India was not achieved through Gandhi alone, which is the opposite of what the capitalist West wants their masses of zombies to believe. There were Indian revolutionaries like Subhas Chandra Bose who advocated for armed struggle and socialist principles and formed the All India Forward Bloc. Another revolutionary was Bhagat Singh, who took place in a bombing of the Central Legislative Assembly in Delhi and a hunger strike in jail, and was martyred at the age of 23. Without the combined efforts of all these individuals and the overall Indian decolonization movement, India probably would have had to wait for its independence. Part 2. Martin Luther King Jr. These crackers believe that MLK Jr. existed in a vacuum of pacifism and that the Civil Rights Act was accomplished through his movement alone. They choose not to mention the other black revolutionaries, such as Angela Davis, Assata Shakur, Malcolm X, Kwame Ture, Fred Hampton, Huey P. Newton, or Mumia Abu-Jamal. Without their physical efforts and intimidating presence, only intimidating the cowardly crackers, the white bourgeois government would never have implemented a Civil Rights Act. Chapter 3. Just what the hell do libs stand for anyways? At a recent No Kings protest, a friend of mine said that a white supremacist showed up spouting racist shit. My friend and an anarchist female confronted him, and the coward got in the face of the female. She became really aggressive, shoving him back, and when this happened, some lib who was libbing the fuck out got in her face to separate her, and then some female piggy showed up to escort our anarchist comrade out and not the white supremacist. While this is expected from a pig, you would think that the lib, who supposedly cares so much about race issues, would have stood up against the racist piece of shit. I know this is not the first time lib protesters have done shit similar to this. Most of these incidences go unreported. Where is this kind of energy when protesters outnumber ICE agents, and yet they all sit there and watch as people get abducted, blowing fucking whistles in their faces as if it does anything? When other protesters get shot at, why don't these libs jump in front of the bullets? Instead, they like to break up well-deserved violence when it occurs to white supremacists, bigots, racists, etc. Whose side are they on anyways? Chapter 4. Not allies, opportunists. Something white libs like to do is highlight breadcrumb issues and not bigger picture items such as revolution or overthrowing capitalism to solve the problems of worldwide capitalism-induced violence. The reason for this is because they are opportunists. When they face a tiny bit of discomfort caused by the contradictions of capitalism, they take to the streets, but like to tell the most oppressed in society, the people who have been on the streets the longest, how to protest. They like to talk about their so-called activism like it's some bullshit capitalist portfolio or resume, as if their experience makes them an expert at getting their demands met by the bourgeois government. As soon as the white wealthy ruling class strategically returns some breadcrumbs to these white liberal opportunists, they go back home to their comfortable middle-class lifestyle, only to be seen again when a few more breadcrumbs are taken away. Ask yourself the question, what has their activism done to benefit the whole of society and the domestic and international working class rather than the breadcrumb objective? Chapter 5. Performative consumerists. Everything they do is performative. Their activism, their caring about the issues such as LGBTQIA rights, women's rights, BIPOC rights, etc. They'll plaster these stickers all over the back of their cars, their laptops, their Stanley mugs, in substitution of actually doing something of value for those causes. On top of the consumerist activism, all they do is chase clout. Every little thing they do must be recorded and plastered all over their TikTok or Instagram pages. For them, it's not about getting eyes on the issues, it's about the likes, follows, and the vibes for the hopes of monetization. These are the reasons why actual leftists refer to white liberals as opportunists. Chapter 6. how liberalism directly contributed to the problems we face today. By only promoting the vote blue no matter who agenda, liberals have further boxed us into the two-party system. This is how we've come into the lame duck presidents we've had since the 1980s and forward. More importantly, through their agenda, they have successfully upheld the corrupt, racist, and murderous system of capitalism and the capitalists who enact these atrocities. The two-party system are two sides of the same capitalist coin. This is why we had ICE raids during the Democratic Biden presidency, but libs forget this. This is why the U.S. was involved in wars in Somalia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Kosovo, Kenya, Tanzania, Afghanistan, and Iraq during the Democratic Clinton presidency, but libs forget this. This is why the U.S. had increased drone strikes by 1,000% under Democratic President Obama, but libs forget this. If Harris was the president, ICE raids would still be going on, but they wouldn't be in the limelight the way it is under Trump, and libs would stay at home pretending that it isn't happening. Under Harris, the U.S. would still be supporting the genocides in Sudan and Palestine, but the libs would refuse to talk about nonviolence and ignore everything that is going on. We still would have abducted President Maduro and initiated the blockade against Cuba, but the libs would praise Harris as a hero to democracy. It's the capitalists who make the decisions, not the Republicans nor the Democratic president. Again, two sides of the same capitalist coin. Chapter 7. Conclusion. In conclusion, white liberals in the U.S. believe that the most oppressed in society, who are mostly, if not exclusively, black and people of color, need to sit back and be murdered in order to appeal to the consciences of pigs, racists, and state officials who have none. Their version of pacifism is based on a false reality of pacifist movements of the past. They pretend to be allies and show up to protests, but in reality, they are only in it for themselves. As soon as they get the appropriate amount of breadcrumbs back, they leave, nowhere to be found. When they hype up their activist resumes, ask them what has their activism achieved. Their activism is purely performative, consumerist, and for clout. They say that they're getting eyes on the issues, but it's really for the likes and follows on their social media channels in the hopes that they get monetized one day. Finally, by continuing to prop up the two-party system, they are keeping us in an infinite loop of corruption, racism, and murder that the capitalist system creates worldwide.